I'm gonna start with a quick story. I was raised in a very conservative, fundamentalist Christian home. My parents did everything they could to censor any kind of sexual content from my brother and I. It was so extreme, in fact, that monthly my brother and I, we would get a magazine to a video game subscription. My mom would take a black Sharpie, go through the magazine, and black out any cleavage of any of the animated female characters that were in the magazine. My parents had really good intentions, but unbeknownst to them, it was pretty useless. I went to private Christian school, and I remember going to a friend's house for a slumber party. I think I was 10 years old. I found myself alone in his parents' living room, flipping through the stations on his DirecTV. His parents happened to have a hardcore porn channel on their television. Going through the stations, I suddenly found myself on this hardcore porn channel to a gangbang scene. As a 10-year-old kid who had barely ever even seen a female nipple, this was quite a shock for me. I can honestly say it flipped my whole world upside down. And then what started as curiosity turned into a 20-year porn habit. This is the modern society that we live in, and it's probably even worse today. There are 10-year-old kids now who have computers in their pockets and the whole internet at their disposal. We didn't have this problem 50 years ago. So I want to approach this whole topic not from a place of morality or religion or anything like that, but simply from a place of mental and sexual health. And I don't believe that pornography is conducive for optimal health. And obviously there are levels to this. It's different for someone who maybe watches porn once a week versus someone who's watching it several times a day. Like anything, most things in life, if you could figure out a way to do it in moderation, it's fine. But there's people out there who can partake even in hardcore drugs recreationally or cigarettes. I don't even think it's worth dabbling at all whatsoever. But I digress, that's my personal opinion. I know this topic has been discussed a lot, but I think I have a unique perspective and hopefully you can gain some value from it. This video won't just be fluffy science facts, but personal experiences that I've had that I can share, some lessons I've learned that can help you on your journey. These are things that I would go back and share with my younger self if I could. I want to start off by talking about some of the actual benefits of quitting porn as a man. It's not going to give you superpowers like the NoFap community talks about. That's mostly placebo BS in my opinion. But there are some massive benefits. If watching porn is a part of your daily life, something that you partake in habitually, the amount of time and hours that you can save every week is tremendous. If you're an ambitious person with somewhat of an entrepreneurial mindset, I'd say that this is one of the biggest productivity hacks. The issue is most guys who are addicted to porn, their daily ritual oftentimes takes an hour, sometimes more. Browsing and browsing, trying to find the perfect video. And some people are doing this multiple times a day. You're losing a lot of time. Porn consumption and masturbation is said to give off as much dopamine as certain hardcore drugs. It can cause ED, depression, and a host of other relational problems. I'm making this video for guys specifically because my experience of the world so far has been through the perspective of being a guy. I know what it feels like to be a man, wasting your vital energy and how frustrating it can be. I can honestly say I don't know what the experience is like for women, but if you're a woman watching this and some of these things apply to you, then great. I want to say that you're not alone in this. I think it's becoming more and more mainstream to discuss these topics openly where it used to be very taboo. I think that's part of the general elevation of human consciousness as a whole. As our species evolves in awareness, discussing these things is not only becoming normalized, but I think it's vital. Okay, so here's a few tips that I think are invaluable. The first tip is don't try and quit from a place of shame or religious guilt because that will fuck you up. Speaking as someone who was raised in a fundamentalist Christian household, they had good intentions, but honestly it just made matters worse. There was tons of weird guilt surrounding any kind of sexuality. And similar to things like binge eating, you find yourself late at night eating too much and then the guilt hits you and then you're like, fuck it, I'm already this far gone, I'm just gonna eat a whole nother bag of chips. The only way to face your inner darkness is to get rid of the shame and guilt. That way you can explore your inner consciousness freely. This taps into the idea of shadow work a little bit that Carl Jung coined. And I believe an aspect of this is very necessary if you want to self-actualize as a man. Something that I think can help you with the shame is to first realize that none of this shit is actually your fault. We live in a society that's not conducive for mental or sexual health. Just like the epidemic of 70% of Americans being overweight, I think 90% or more of men are addicted to porn in some capacity. That being said, it's not your fault, but only you can take responsibility. Only you can make the change if that's something that you desire. The reason I had the desire to quit altogether is because I'm the kind of person who doesn't like not having control of my impulses. It was a process, but if I can do it, so can you. I'm telling you, it's completely possible to quit altogether. I'm proof of that. Haven't played with my downstairs soldier in a really long time. Anyway, so the shame, not helpful. Get rid of it. And if it's perpetuating, it's most likely from a lack of self-awareness, which can be built over time. Which brings me to the second tip, cultivating self-awareness. Here's what I mean by that. When you find yourself consuming porn, you end up in an almost trance-like state where you're just browsing through, you're going from video to video, and all of a sudden you look at the clock and an hour and a half has passed. You are almost in a completely unconscious state, much like someone who's binge eating, and before they know it, they ate the whole cake and they feel sick. I remember years ago when my self-awareness started to increase instead of being on autopilot. It's like your daily commute to work. You zone out driving, before you know it, you're there, and you're like, how did I get here? Eventually, what would happen is there would be these moments of self-awareness where I would hear this inner voice at the height of the dopamine rush, regardless of whatever depraved garbage was on my screen at the time. That inner voice would be like, I hate this. I want to be in control of my impulses. I'm better than this. Then that voice would disappear and I would continue to mindlessly do whatever it is I was doing. I would later reflect on that inner voice and I realized that there was no shame in that inner voice. It was always calm, loving, and patient, and speaking from a place of higher wisdom, like a higher version of myself that wanted to be actualized. That's really the only way I can explain it. I'm not trying to make it woo-woo or overly spiritual. If you're a non-spiritual person, you can just view it as a higher part of your mind. Something that can also help with this is daily meditation. If you don't have a meditation practice, start with 1 minute a day, and then up it to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes. I've found that 10 minutes a day is the most sustainable. Sometimes I'll go longer if in the moment it's enjoyable and I feel at peace, then I'll continue. The next tip is rid yourself of triggers. A big trigger for a lot of guys, I think, is social media, especially Instagram. What I've noticed about Instagram is if you start an Instagram account and you just have listed that you're a male, the first thing that pops up on the Discover page is scantily dressed women or random girls doing squats in yoga pants. It's like, here's a tutorial on how to build your glutes. They act like it's targeted for women, but really it's targeted for thirsty dudes. So something you can do on Instagram specifically is on the Discover page, the moment you see content that's meant to pull you into that world, you can hold it down and click not interested. And after doing this for a couple days, even just like 5 minutes a day, it'll eventually go away completely. This is just another way how society is not set up for your benefit and does not give a fuck about your mental health. You can be the curator for your social media experience. Be sure to only follow accounts that are positive and pull you in the direction that you want to go in. A lot of guys that are following like Instagram models, there's no point in doing that. You're just wasting your attention and vital energy. This leads me into the next tip, which is basically just a dopamine detox. A large majority of this detox is social media apps, Netflix, mindlessly scrolling on your phone, and super palatable foods. But I find that they're most useful as part of a reward system. After a long day of doing hard tasks, it's okay to watch a couple episodes of Netflix. Just make sure that there's a hard stop and you don't mindlessly keep going. Use these things as little rewards for the work that you've done. Even things like dating apps can hijack your dopamine. These apps are built to give you a rush of dopamine and keep you using them as long as possible. All these things can be a tool. Just bring as much awareness to it as possible so the use of these things are all intentional. I found on my iPhone that Do Not Disturb and the sleep feature are your best friend, especially the sleep feature, because when you turn that on, no calls or texts or any notifications can come through. And then the moment that you turn it off, they all pop up. You can review any important notifications that you might have gotten during that time period. The next tip is learn how to redirect the sexual energy that you feel in your body. I think it was Napoleon Hill who was one of the first people to talk about sexual transmutation. Another thing that can sound very woo-woo or overly spiritual, but even from a scientific or evolutionary standpoint, the sexual charge and sexual urges that you feel as a man, it's evolutionarily there, so you have the desire to procreate and continue your species. Back to self-awareness, you can bring awareness into that energy. Sometimes in my body, if something triggers that sexual energy, I could just sit there and feel it now and be like, wow, that's a lot of energy. Just sit with it and be fully present with it. Let it pass through you. Or it can be extremely useful. You can use that energy instead of wasting it watching porn and masturbating towards building whatever goals that you might have. You can go out, take a long walk or a run, hit an intense workout, start brainstorming ideas of the things that you want to create, the business that you want to build. It's so much more useful than a lot of guys realize. And once you start harnessing that energy instead of wasting it, it's very eye-opening. And if you're someone who's wasting that energy like first thing in the day or multiple times a day, instead of viewing that sexual energy and that sexual tension within you as negative, you'll view it as potential. And that's why it's there. You'll start building yourself as a man from that energy, which will naturally start to attract real women. This is how it was designed. This is how you were designed. Tap into this. Harness it. A bonus tip is accountability. If you have any close, non-judgmental friends who also have goals and are ambitious and they care about you, you can be accountable to each other and discuss these things openly. Hey, I've got this goal. I've tried to go a week without doing it. I fucked up. Hey, you can do better. Having that support can be very, very helpful. And if you're serious about that, I know that there's communities, either online or in person, where guys keep each other accountable. And finally, I want to say that if you've had a porn addiction for years, it can take years to get on the other side of it. To become 100% free of something that's been integrated into your life since you were a little kid, it's going to take time. Be patient with yourself. If you have a daily habit, try to turn it into a habit that's once every few days, eventually once a week, eventually once a month, and then before you know it, the gaps will get wider and wider, and then a couple years go by and you don't even think about it anymore. It's the process of retraining your brain. And it goes from the point of practicing discipline to where that discipline just becomes almost like a reverse habit that you've created. And that's it. You can fucking do this. If this is something that you desire, one day at a time, there's no guilt, there's no shame. It's a process, and I'm telling you it's possible. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll reply to all comments. Just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you later.